Welcome to Blooming Wildwood Homestead. Today we're going to talk about power outage preparedness on the homestead. The reason why I wanted to talk about this topic is that just last week we ended up with a storm blowing through, and I thought I was pretty much ready for any type of power disruption, and I was reminded about some things that I did not have on hand that I needed to take into consideration here on the homestead. When I lived in the country, or in the city, things were a little bit different. We didn't have as many power outages, first of all, and when the power did go out, it would only be out for an hour or two. I think the longest it ever went out was maybe 4 hours, and then it would be right back on. When I live in the country, the power can be out for many days. So I think the longest I remember the power being out here when I lived with my parents was maybe 7 days. And so I know that the power can be out for a longer period of time. The other difference between the two is that in the city I was on city water. So I still had access to water even though I didn't have hot water. There was still running water available, water to flush toilets, and those kinds of things. When you live in the country and you're on a well, everything is dependent upon electricity, being able to pump the well, and so you just have to look at things from a different point of view. So I thought I would make today's video kind of with that thought in mind. I'm not talking about what you would need in an apocalyptic grid down situation, but we're mainly focusing on a few things that might be helpful to you when a storm blows through and knocks the power out for a few days, just so that you can have what you need to be prepared and be comfortable. I'm also not talking about what you would need for livestock in this particular video. If you're dealing with animals and you have a power outage, that's a whole nother situation, and that definitely requires even more forethought and planning in case of a power outage. So today we're mainly dealing with how to keep the household running and how you can stay functioning if the power is out for a few days. So I've divided our topics up into a few different categories. The first category deals with heat. If you're living in the country, you may have a wood stove, and if you do, you have a lot of options available to you. Wood stove is going to provide you with heat even though the power is out. It also provides you with a way that you can do a little bit of cooking or warming up of water for washing purposes, or also for making a tea or coffee or things of that nature. So if you have a wood stove, that's great. Make sure that you have plenty of wood on hand and ready to go so that if you have a situation where you can't get out for a few days or the power's out for a few days, you're gonna be just fine and able to completely cope in that method. If you do not have a wood stove and you only have electric heat or furnace or something of that nature, you might want to look at your options. If it's something that you can light a pilot light and still have access to it when the power's out, then great. If it's not something that works that way, you might want to look at some type of small heater that you can use inside the house. I know that there are a lot of different heaters out there. I haven't used any personally, but I think the Heat Buddy or something of that nature I've heard is something that's safe to use indoors, provided that you use it in a place that has good ventilation. Some heaters can be extremely dangerous if you use them indoors just because of the emissions that they put off. So definitely check on that before you purchase anything or look at running it inside your home. The other thing that you can do when you're looking at heating options would be to keep a wool blanket on hand. So I use this one on the back of my couch. I use it as more of a decorative item, but it's also there to be able to provide warmth should I need to wrap up in it if I were in a situation where it was really cold and I needed that extra warmth to be provided. So looking into a wool blanket might also be an option. They are definitely spendy. However, being that they're natural fibers, they are going to keep you much warmer, and it will be well worth the investment if you need it in that particular time period. You also could look at investing in one for the bed. You can use even this one on the bed, and that definitely can help to retain some warmth especially if you're losing power with some type of a snowstorm or during the dead of winter. You're gonna need a little bit of extra warmth and ability to keep warm. So look at wool blankets. That could be a really good investment. The next area that we're going to talk about is water. When you're in the city, like I said, I had access to water even though it wasn't hot water, and I didn't really have to worry about having as much saved and on hand. Now, I mean, I did have some bottled water and some things like that, but I didn't worry about it quite as much. So when you're in the country and you're running off in a well, you need to think about either maybe putting some extra water in the bathtub or taking and putting some extra water into like some of those Colgan type containers, or you could even use 5-gallon buckets, but making sure that you have water that you're able to use for flushing the toilet, washing dishes, washing people, and also for drinking. So if you've got some water saved, you might be able to run it through a water filter, some type of Berkey type system or something like that. Or if you have bottled water on hand, that's a great way to make sure that you have water that's available for drinking purposes. So just keep that in mind and think about how you're going to save that water and run water to have on the side so that you can keep things sanitary and running even though you don't have power. The next area that I wanted to touch on is power and like some sort of way to light things. So if you are just wanting to keep a couple of lights running in the house, you might be able to look at a solar generator. That could be something that is very quiet. You can put it inside the house, and as long as you've had enough sun to charge it, or you had the forethought to charge it on the by plugging it in, then you would be able to use that for at least keeping the lights on. I have not experimented with or had any type of experience with using a solar generator to power a refrigerator or freezers or things of that nature. So if you have some information about that, feel free to share that in the comments below. That's not something that I have had experience with. Having that in mind, you might need a gas generator that's going to be large enough to be able to run a freezer or refrigerator. If you have food stored in those areas, you want to make sure that you don't lose that during a power outage. Even if it's 3 days, you're still going to want to run that generator to keep things nice and cool. The last thing you want is to have harvested your meat or purchased meat from somewhere and have it in a freezer, and then you lose it all because you didn't have the ability to be able to keep that cold during the storm. So just look at what your needs are and what you might want to be able to do that way. And if you have a gas generator, make sure that you have enough gas on hand to be able to power that up during the course of the power outage. Next up is dealing with lights. So I have candles, of course. This one's more of a decorative candle, but it also just does a little bit to keep some warmth, and it'll provide a little bit of light around the house. You could use an oil lantern. If you have children or pets, you might not want to have open flame. That might be something that's a concern for you, especially if you have little ones. And so I have this battery operated lantern, and this one is a 60-day lantern. It's a little bit longer life. If you keep it on the lower setting, it should last for 60 days without having to change the batteries. So this is the regular setting, and I don't know if you can tell on camera, but that is definitely a very bright light. And then you can adjust to different lighting levels based on whatever your need is. It's essential that you have some type of light source. Of course, flashlights and things of that nature can be great as well. What I love about the lantern type of a situation is that it does have a handle, so you can go ahead and hang that up somewhere. If you're trying to work on getting the generator set up, or if you need to go out and get firewood in or something like that, you might need something a little bit larger, something that can hang, and you're not trying to hold and maneuver the flashlight while you're trying to do those other things. I'll link to any of the items that I can find, or things that might be similar to things that I have in the description down below. In addition to having your candles and your lights, you want to make sure that you're well stocked on ways to light them. So having extra lighters on hand, or matches, of course. Those are going to be very important as you're looking at making sure that you can actually light the candles or oil lamps or whatever it is that you decide is a good option for you. So the next area that I wanted to talk about is cleanliness. And this was something that I hadn't really taken into consideration. When you're out of power for quite a few days, you need some way to take a shower. So this again comes into that pre-planning stage. If you've filled up the bathtub with water, now you're gonna have a little bit of a problem if you wanna try and go and shower. So just think through all of those logistics. I don't have the best answer for you. It really depends on your needs and what's available. At my urban location, I didn't even have a bathtub, so that wouldn't have been an option for me to start with. But what I decided to do is go ahead and purchase a camp shower. And this is something that you could use if you were going out camping, or if the power goes out. My thought is I can go ahead and fill it with water. If it happens to be during a time of the year when we do have a lot of sun, it is able to solar warm. But if it's not during a time when we have a lot of sun, I can heat up some water on the stove, whether it's my stove top or the wood stove, and I could put that in here to be able to at least take a little bit of a shower to stay clean. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, I'm not someone who uses dry shampoo a lot, so this is not something that I keep on hand for an everyday occurrence, but I did invest in a little bit of dry shampoo just because I have longer hair and it takes a lot more to wash it on a regular basis, which is not a problem when you have power and water. But if you were out of power and running water, you might opt to not wash quite as often, and dry shampoo just gives you a little bit more of an option if you want to try and stretch it an extra day or so. Those are just kind of some things. The other item I would think about is how you're going to do dishes. So if you need a dish pan or some sort of a drying rack, if you don't normally do dishes by hand, you might just want to kind of think through those items as well. And the last few items were a few miscellaneous things. Some might be obvious, some maybe not as obvious. For me, I am definitely a big coffee drinker. It might be a little bit problematic from time to time. If you haven't already seen, because I love coffee so much, we've started a show called Coffee Talk, Homestead Coffee Talk. So you can look up some of those. We have a couple episodes live already. But I definitely enjoy my coffee. And typically I will do a pour over and I have freshly ground beans, so on and so forth. In a power outage situation, that's not the most convenient option, or potentially not even an option at all. So a couple of things, since coffee is important, that I thought about. I went ahead and purchased a little bit of instant coffee just to have on hand. And I'm not typically an instant coffee drinker, but in this case, it's definitely better than having no coffee. So all I need is to heat up some water and I can add that to the instant coffee and I'll have my cup. And with heating water up, I do have some cast iron pans I could use, or I found this cute little cast iron teapot, which again is kind of decorative, multi-purpose. It's kind of decorative if you wanted to use it to add a little bit of moisture to the air. If you have a wood stove, it's something that can sit on top, and it also could go ahead and heat up water so that I could make tea, or I could use it for my instant coffee, and that would just be another option for me to be able to do that. So when you're in some type of power outage situation, sometimes it's just nice to have those little things, to be able to wrap up in your wool blanket, have your cup of coffee or tea, and just enjoy the stillness of the moment. So those were a couple of things. You probably already have some soup or something like that on hand. Again, it's super easy to just dump in a pot. Few dishes are needed. It's pretty much ready to go. You just need to heat it up. If that's not something that you normally keep on hand, you might want to have a little bit of that or something similar, just so that you're not having to go through a big process for food preparation during a power outage. The other thing that I realized I was neglecting is an alarm clock. So I work in the city, but I live in town, or I live in the country. And so even if my power's out here, there's probably still going to be power in town, which means I'm still gonna need to go to work. And I currently use my cell phone for my alarm clock, and I realized with our last storm that blew through, I really need to have some type of a backup option. So I hopped on Amazon, looked for a wind-up clock, and then got distracted by something that I thought was cute, and it's a battery operated clock. It's not a wind-up. Wind-up would have been more practical, but cute ended up in the cart. So at least it's better than needing to be plugged into the wall. So you might consider, if you have a clock, to be able to help you get up and get to work on time if you're needing to work still in that sort of situation. And the last thing that I was thinking of is having a drying rack available. So hopefully the power is not out for such a long period of time that you have to worry about doing laundry. However, if you if it is really rainy out, or I don't know, things happen and you need to dry some clothing, it might be nice to have a drying rack that you can put in front of the stove to be able to dry things out. I mean, if it's during the heart of winter and you've got snow clothes that need to be dried, or things like that, you want to have something to hang them up on and be able to do that. So having a drying rack on hand might also be an option. I hope today was valuable for you. If you were getting value from today's video, please click that like button. And as always, don't forget to subscribe and share down below what are some things that maybe I didn't have on my list that you like to have available for power outages, and some things that you do to be prepared and to stay prepared so that you're not caught off guard and you're able to make it through relatively seamlessly in that type of a situation. So let us know down below in the comments. I would love to hear from you, and I'll see you back here next time. Bye everyone.